when he was backing up, he realized that he couldn't stop. So instead of backing up 5 feet to be able to get the door open to vacuum it out, he kept going, and he went up the hill and panicked and put it in neutral and rode it back down the hill.
Right back into the shop.
Back into the shop, and demoed 2 toolboxes and the wall to the office.
The following program features a bunch of doofuses talking about the automotive aftermarket. The stuff we, or our guests may say, do not necessarily reflect the beliefs of our peers, our sponsors, or any other associations we may have. There may be some spicy language in this show, so if you get your feelings hurt easily, you should probably just move along. So without further ado, it's time for Confessions of a Shop Owner, with your host, Mike Allen.
What's up, man?
Hey, Mike, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing okay. I just had ASTA Summer Social last night. Was hosted at Carfix in our big store in Garner. And so crazy, bonkers, busy day. The guy sold $26,000 of approvals during the day. And, they're used to being there and just kind of grinding out until they're done in the evening. I was like, it's a hard out at 5:30. Lights off, doors locked. You got to go because this thing starts at 6:30. Parking lot was slammed. There was nowhere to park, and we're expecting 60 to 70 people, right? So, and it's 140 degrees out there. So shuffling cars and kind of moving stuff around in the lobby to make space for all the chairs and everything, and setting up cornhole and whatnot. It was a little bit of a zoo, but ultimately it was a huge success. Everybody had a good time. People were there till like 10 o'clock.
What we call that, Mike?
What do we call that?
We call that first world problems.
Oh, how's that a first world problem, man? What I did get, I got a lot.
I was too busy to have my friends over for an afternoon social, and it was a pain in the butt to move cars around.
Well, I wanted to make sure that I complained about how hot it was because a lot of folks gave me a rash of shit about the fact that shop is not air conditioned. Pretty much every technician turned shop owner that was there, called me an evil shop owner for not having air conditioning. So, and I told them all that air conditioning is for pussies. So,
well, if you practice in the heat, then you're used to the heat, right?
I don't know. I actually have no foot to stand on with that because it's 72 degrees right here. It's 90 outside. So
our high school football coach, that's what he used to tell us all the time. He said, if you practice in the heat, then the heat doesn't matter. If you're in it all day, it's just normal.
Well, I think there is a degree of you get used to what you're surrounded by. Like, there are not a lot of shops in Houston that have air conditioning, right?
Right.
There are a ton of shops in New York State that have air conditioning. The guys in Houston could never work in New York because it's so cold. It would drive them crazy. The guys in New York could never work in Houston because it's so hot, right? So it's what your body gets used to.
Yeah, 100%.
I do have a dude who just moved down from I think he was in Iowa, and he moved down. He's been with us for a few months now, and the heat is killing him. I'm like, bro, ice cold Gatorade, water, go sit in the break room, go sit in the parts room, whatever, like 10 minutes out of every hour, whatever you got to do until you acclimate, man. I can't have you falling out. It's okay.
Don't let him fool you too much. And Mr. Employee from Iowa, if you're listening, don't take this the wrong way. But the hottest I've ever been in my entire life was in Newton, Iowa. In 2012, it was 112 degrees.
How much was it in the truck?
I was not in the truck. It was 100. It was 148 degrees inside of the car I was in.
Man, they should fit race cars with air conditioning. I mean,
they
should never.
They do have air conditioning. Yeah, we got air conditioning in them. They call it air conditioning. It makes it about 10 degrees cooler than what the ambient air temperature is. So instead of 140, it was blowing 130 degree air.
So you just had a hairdryer in your face.
Yeah.
I assume that's when you were racing on the circuit still.
That is correct. Yep.
Yeah. No thanks. Pass. How much weight do you lose on a race day like that?
I'm a little bigger than the average racer, so my weight loss was a little bit more drastic. But I would lose between 15 and 20 pounds.
15 and 20 pounds?
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit. That's the new weight loss fad, is just go race.
Well, it's water weight. It comes right back. But we did we did a study with one of the guys had a physician for a father, and he was a cardiologist.
TechMetric is the all-in-one software solution for auto shops. It can do just about anything.
How can I build trust with customers?
How much? TechMetric can do that.
How can I do an inspection faster?
TechMetric can do that.
How can I make this as painless as possible?
TechMetric can do that.
How can I run my shop from anywhere?
TechMetric can do that.
Can I just pay for my repair from my phone?
TechMetric can do that.
How can I be a better man?
You could try putting your crap away, Dennis.
Sometimes you just need to put your crap away. But for shop productivity, increased revenue, and a better customer experience, TechMetric can do that.
Look, here's the deal. I like to think that I'm pretty good at running an auto repair shop. It's what I've done for 20 plus years, but I'm not good at managing a marketing budget and all the different facets of a truly well-rounded marketing plan. There's mail, there's local advertising, there's website, there's Google AdWords, there's all the different things that go into that, and it's just not what I'm good at. So what I've chosen to do is to buy myself the time to focus on what I am good at, while having someone else execute on all of those things at a way higher level than anything I could ever do. That's what turnkey auto marketing does for me. So if you feel like you could use some of that same magic, I'm going to recommend that you go to turnkeyautomarketing.com, get a free consultation, tell them that I sent you, tell them that Confessions of a Shop Owner sent you. You won't be disappointed.
And he actually came by and did a 6-month study on us, where they came and took carbon monoxide readings on us before each race. So they would get a baseline before, like as soon as we got to the racetrack, before we ever got in the car, and then at the end of the race, they would come by afterwards. So after 3 days of being around it, and our carbon monoxide levels were about 40 times what the normal average was supposed to be.
Seems healthy.
So he convinced us, all rightfully so, to start doing oxygen therapy. So we had oxygen tanks and all that kind of stuff that so I'd get out of the car and you go sit down and put the little cannules on and, go through your debrief on the session and all that. But it actually made a big difference, really.
I'm not sure that now is the appropriate time for it, but I want to hear stories about creative ways to cheat in racing. Because I've been hearing some of those stories on like Earnhardt's podcast. It's pretty interesting to hear how creative they got with that stuff.
So I have some really good stories on that. I have one personal story, and then I have others that I've heard that have been passed down. So I was fortunate enough to be able to race at some of the super speedways like Daytona and Talladega. And before Daytona every year, there's a big test in January, and it's a big 3-day event, and you just go down there and play around with a bunch of stuff, right? So we had a 2-day test plan, and one of the test plans was for qualifying was to have a removable leg brace cushion that was on Velcro and had a little handle, and I could peel it off, and then I would take my left arm and stick it up against the window, and that would block the air off from the window and therefore give you a little bit
more aerodynamic.
Bit more aerodynamic. So we were third or fourth on the board at this point in time at practice out of like 100 cars. And we got to the point in the test plan where we're supposed to do this practice. And the way they do it for that test is you have to run the apron until you get to the back. The apron is the flat part of the racetrack until you get to the back stretch, and then you blend onto the back stretch. So you're doing about 130, 135 miles an hour on the flat spot in the apron. So I reach down to go grab this thing, and I'm wide open in third gear, and I'm trying to get it up. Well, the thing, I hit the steering wheel a little bit, and it drops out of my hand, and I lost my focus, and I bent down to go, look down to go get it, and I wound up hitting my right rear tire against the apron, against the track. So, the track is like this.
So you wrecked in practice.
That made it go. Car went directly to the wall like that. And I was still wide open in third gear. So it came about 4.5 feet off the ground. Before we got on camera, I told you I'd broken my ribs twice in my life. That was one of the times that I broke my ribs. So that was while that was not cheating in a race, because we didn't get a chance to try that we nixed that one. But that probably would have been my biggest cheat scenario if we'd have done it. But that was a big oopsie right there.
Well, I
But
mean,
no,
there wasn't a rule specifically against having a leg brace in the window, right?
let's just say if it would have been found out, it would have been the answer. You're not supposed to have that window sealed off.
Yeah.
It doesn't specifically mention anything about a leg brace, but how that was supposed to work is I would take it, stick it right back before I pull it off. But we decided that's probably not a good idea to tempt that fate twice. But
Copy.
I tried to tell them multitasking is not my thing. And but as far as some of the other good ones at Daytona and Talladega, they used to take Visine bottles and fill it with nitrous, and they would run a tube to the carburetor from inside the car, and so the guy would have the Visine bottle in his pocket, and then when he would get in, they would wait till he comes off of turn 4 and goes, gets straight going down the back straight, and he would squeeze that Visine bottle and get a little nitrous shot coming to the start finish line.
That's awesome.
When they used to have the roof hatches at the top, there were guys that would keep a cut broomstick beside the seat, and when they would get out on the racetrack, they would push up against that roof flap because it would take air off the spoiler. And there's all sorts of nifty little things like that.
I mean, but how does that not get caught? Why is there a broomstick during tech inspection? Why is there a broomstick in the truck?
Because tech inspection is going through a series of, that's like saying in our quality control check, why doesn't the QC guy find out that the spark plug wasn't torqued to spec?
Yeah.
They have a specific checklist of things that they're looking for, and looking underneath the driver's seat is not on that checklist.
Yeah, copy.
But it's like everything else, somebody gets caught doing it, and now it gets added to the book, and it is one more thing that gets added to the checklist, and that's why tech takes a whole entire day now, because somebody created a rule for it.
You're so good at cheating so much.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we should talk about CarFix, I imagine.
Sure.
So one of the questions that we got online was I should talk less about silly, stupid stuff and more about numbers and the financials and actually the kind of the benchmarks that we want to have. And I think the appropriate time to respond in a snarky way is with Brian on another episode where we will be childish. But the appropriate time to talk about numbers and benchmarks and targets, I think, is absolutely right here, because that's your sweet spot, and that's what you exist to help shop owners out with. So one of the things we're going to do today is go over the P&L from May and talk about kind of some of the things that happened in May and how those things affect and reflect in the P&L and the ultimate effect that it had on the bottom line. So, and also I think you're probably going to beat me up a little bit today because
we had a good session the last time. We had a pet the dog session because you had gotten some stuff knocked off your list, and you guys were heading in the right direction, and then now here we are a month later. We'll have to do a bad doggy treat.
Yeah, it's time for the shot collar, I think. So, yeah.
But so we're prepping for the meeting today, and performance report's not filled out, so we don't have any numbers to really go over from May. So I'll just kind of have to ask you there, how was May?
If you haven't listened to coaching call number 5, you should go back and listen to it so you have a frame of reference. This is coaching call number 6, but April was the best month we'd ever had. First month with 3 technicians in a long, long time. We had 2 advisors on the front counter, and it was just kind of humming along. Expenses were abnormally high due to some outside factors, but we still made really good money. May was different. Because of some staffing changes and moves, the second advisor that was at that store got moved back to one of the other stores, and the advisor that was still there, it's a lot to do for him by himself there to do everything. And that suffered, and authorization rate suffered significantly. And we went from, I think we were 140, give or take $1,000 in April. We were 102 in May in top line revenue. And expenses came down a little bit, right? Because there are some expenses that are tied to revenue, but most expenses are relatively fixed. And the net effect was we didn't make any money to speak of. I think the bottom line was 3 points net. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
The true bottom line, actually, after I look at owner expense, was zero. I think we lost $300 in May. So I should have taken
you sucked all the profit out of
$305
it.
less out of the company. So
Said you sucked all the profit out of it, Mike.
yeah, all $3,000 of it. If you're like me, you know there's always hidden revenue in missed maintenance sales or overlooked customer concerns. Detect Auto helps auto shops unlock that revenue by analyzing vehicle service histories, pinpointing maintenance recommendations, and equipping advisors to confidently address customer questions. It's easy. It integrates with your existing software, and your team will love it. Check out detectauto.com and see how your shop can stop guessing and start selling better service recommendations today.
So we're going to kind of, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through, I know we can't share the P&L for them as far as.
I might see if I can get Braxton to splice in the P&L at certain parts of the conversation, just give a frame of reference. If you can do that, great.
Okay.
I can't, sorry.
Yep. So we're going to kind of run through this. I want to run through this as an exercise with you. You've got a lot of these numbers baked into your P&L as well. But I think this is a great example for the listeners that are out there to really see what they should be doing, month-end review on the P&L, good month, bad month, and then kind of where the performance really affects things, and then how to react when we see that. Because a lot of times I know in the early stages of my professional career, you just scroll straight down to the bottom and see what see what it looks like. And then you might go back up and take a look at expenses, and then you see, oh gosh, I got all these expenses. My expenses were the same as my gross profit. I've got an expense problem. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time today kind of going over how to evaluate that and how to figure out whether we have a top line revenue problem, a gross profit problem, or do we have an expenses problem in the body of the P&L. And then from there, we're going to spend some time talking about some of the staffing changes that you discussed and how that interrupted your process, and then see what we have in place for June this month and working into July. Sounds fair?
Good. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Let's do it.
Before we get into that, between now and next week, if you could please go through and backdate the performance report. That way we have some numbers to look at when we meet again in July.
I think what I'll end up doing is I'll just do it as soon as we get off the call, because I got to stay on top of that stuff. I apologize.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. All righty. So let's jump into the P&L here. Like you just kind of described to them, you've got $102,000, $101,807 in top line revenue income for the month. So we're down about $39,000. And from there, we have a cost of labor of $27,300,
which feels astronomically high. But we talked about a little bit of that. That's shifting the risk from the technician to the owner when you have non-flat rate pay, right? Yep. So everybody over there has a guaranteed minimum that's pretty significant. And so when revenue comes down, cost of labor goes through the roof as a percentage of revenue. And
yes,
that's what we're seeing.
That's 100% correct. So again, not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I commend you for paying your guys regardless, but that is one of those numbers that we need to kind of stay on top of. And as top line revenue comes down, that cost of labor percentage winds up eating into the gross profit of the store pretty strong. So you have a target set here on your P&L at 18% for the cost of labor. And just to give a brief description of that for anybody out there that's listening, cost of labor is going to be the technician pay, total pay of the technician team. and that 18% is 18% of the total sales. So what we have in this scenario is we have right at 27%. So we're close to 10% high on our cost of labor there. And one other thing that I like to do in this scenario, Mike, can you look up in May and tell me what your total sold hours were for that month?
Yep. In May, we sold 401 hours on 173 cars. And in April, we sold 504 hours on 175 cars. So car count was exactly the same. We were down a little over 100 hours. And effective labor rate was also down $10. Gross profit per hour was down $17. It was just kind of down across the board.
So we take those, anytime we have that type of an imbalance there with the cost of labor at the top versus a percentage of income, I like to use that as an opportunity to go back and check what our effective labor cost per billable hour was for the month, just to see kind of where we're at in target there. If we take our 27,000, we divide it by 401, we're at $69 per billable hour was what our effective labor cost was. And just to put that in perspective for everybody, if we're shooting for a 70% GP on labor and we divide that number by 30%, that would mean our effective labor rate would have to be $230.
227. Don't make it unrealistic.
Yeah, to be able to overcome that $69 of effective labor cost.
So my cost of labor is unsustainable at that level of revenue.
At that level of revenue, 100%. Yeah. So, again, I know you know a lot of this and you're already in practice and rhythm on some of this stuff, but for those of you out there that are listening, I want you to take your P&L each month, do it by percentage of income. So you're going to run it for the end of the month, add in the percentage of income for your report, and then take a look at that number. We want it to be under 20% for technicians is typically where we want. That 17% number is the target, but anywhere between 17 to 20 is acceptable. If it's high, and I want to make sure that I clarify this, it does not mean you're paying your technicians too much. That's not what it means. What it means is we didn't have enough production for the level of technician pay that we had, and that it could be a productivity issue at the technician level, but it also could be a function of what we've discussed here already, which is this is really more of a counter problem, right? You had the same level of car count. We had pretty much the same level of everything else. We had a reduction in performance at the counter because we had a reduction of counter staff. So we took the same amount of volume, pushed it through one guy, and the experience got watered down.
Well, and to give a frame of reference, in the previous month in April, when things were good, when revenue was up, right, cost of labor was actually a little bit less even because of some other factors that were there, but not significantly less. My cost of labor per hour was $46 as opposed to, what did we say it was, 68?
Yeah, 69.
Yeah, and so by 0.3, my effective labor rate would need to be $153 to be in the right margin there. So that's how much, falling short on revenue when you have fixed expenses for labor can negatively impact bottom line. So.
Yep, 100%. And so we're going to talk about
shop owners all like flat rate.
And it's, it's the lazy way to do that. But it does solve that problem.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
So we're going to come down. The next one that I want to take a look at is our cost of parts sold. Our cost of parts sold here, we have 17,386. So we're at 17%. So the reason we want that number to be under 25% is what we're looking at there. So you're well underneath of that 25% of your cost of materials. So where we're getting at there is you're holding a strong part margin. So our biggest issue here, when we drop down to our gross profit, we're at 53.8% gross profit overall. So we're about 6 to 7% off of our target of 60 to 62.
That's almost all labor.
We've identified that that's going to be all in labor. So we're estimating appropriately at the front. We're not discounting heavily. We don't have an issue there with estimating. We just have an issue with conversion is kind of what it seems like at the moment.
I think you're not wrong.
But what I want to highlight for everybody, the next big one as far as the line of expenses to go down, when we get below our gross profit and our cost of goods, I want to jump down to where you have your payroll.
Mm-hmm.
So 60/50.
Okay.
And we're going to see that our total payroll expenses for the month of April or the month of May were 40% of our revenue. So again, we're trying to keep that number, and that's total expenses minus technicians. Obviously, when we add technicians back
non-labor payroll.
Yeah. Non-labor payroll. So that's your service advisors, your managers, your porters, everybody else that's not lumped into the cost of labor. Obviously, we'd like to see that number lower. Again, that's another direct effect of us missing our top line number.
What's your benchmark on that number?
So when I put total, I add the technicians back into that, and I'm trying to keep mine under 35%.
Okay.
So if we add technicians back into that, we're at 66%. And obviously that's unattainable for profitability. We're not gonna overcome that. And so if we're looking at that, the real questions that we have to ask ourselves is, are we overstaffed, or did we just underperform?
Again, I think that's a question that you have to ask when you're analyzing your business. We know that in this instance, it's underperformance because looking back into April, right, we're comparing the good and the bad. In April, that number was 24% as opposed to 40% in May. So that's just a reflection of not getting that top line where it needs to be. We had the same car count, so yeah.
And so the other thing that I want to, so as an owner, if you're wondering whether I'm overstaffed, missing potential, one of the things that you go take a look at there is what is my car count? Am I at my car count goals? You guys know your car count's the same as it was previous month. So it's a performance issue. If car count's not at where it should be, I want you to take a look at that percentage of advertising, to your total income, because that's your responsibility as the shop owner, is to drive the opportunity for cars to come. And if we see that number significantly low, you're about 6.2% right now. So you've met your obligation there. I want to see it somewhere between 3 and 8%. In most cases, there are some that's going to be less than that, and some that it's going to be more than that, depending on what your current growth goals are. But that 3 to 8% seems to be a pretty decent little sweet spot. Anything below 3%, we tend to be falling, beginning to lag behind, being able to overcome our churn and continue to add new customers, new business to the funnel. Anything above that 8%, we start getting diminishing return on investment to some degree, or maybe outpacing current staff unless we're in a heavy growth mode. So that's where we get that 3 to 8% at. But you're well within there. So I would agree with you. I think we need to focus on, kind of getting back to that customer experience that we had at the front counter when we had 2 advisors. But just to kind of sum up our conversation here on the P&L, if we go all the way down to the bottom and we look at our total expenses, we're going to see that our total expenses are 50% of the total revenue. And when we say we only had a 50% GP to begin with, that leads us down 50 minus 50 is 0. And if we get to the bottom of it, we have what, Mike?
It's not 0. It's negative $323.
Yeah. So really, the easy high level math here is we want 60% gross profit at the top, 40% total expenses, leaves us 20% at net profit down there on the bottom. So that 60-40-20 rule is what we always try to push for our clients. That's just the easiest math. Obviously, 20% is the number that matters most. So you could have 50-30-20 is fine with me. But we have to get to 20. We have to slice it one way or the other.
Do you know why 20% is the benchmark that everybody throws
I
out
do.
there?
And I've had this conversation with a couple people that are significantly smarter than me. And because I asked that same question, because it seems like a really arbitrary number. And the response that I got out of it was this: whether this is 100% correct or not, I don't know. I liked it and it made sense to me. So I share it with other people. Do you know what the average percentage of return is for the S&P on the index?
So you've got to make enough money to make it worth the risk of having a shop versus just putting money in an investment account.
Yeah.
Is it average 8% a year or something?
If you go, it's hovering right around 10% right now. So between 8 and 12%, depending on how things are going. So we flush that out over the long haul. We'll give it close to 10. So the response that I was given was, listen, you got twice as much crap to deal with, and to start your business, you had a capital investment on the front end. No, I don't want to say nobody, but very few of us had zero entry cost into getting into business. So if we had $100,000 entry cost, we could have taken that $100,000, invested it in the S&P, went and been the Walmart greeter, and had zero stress in our life, and that money would have made 10% year over year, and we would have gotten a return on our investment. Whereas now we have a shop, and we have employees, and we have customers, and we have all these things and problems that come along with it.
And risk and liability.
The risk and the liability and all of this. So the return on that investment should at least be double what we could get out of the S&P with no risk, right? Yeah. I don't want to say no risk, but very little risk.
Yeah.
So that was the reason that 20% was given to me, and I bought into that as a pretty daggum good idea, reason for why it should be that. Obviously, it can be higher. I think we both know operators that are, in that 30 to 35% range. I think that's rare, but it's possible, and it is doable in our industry. But for the amount of work that we do, and the amount of effort, the amount of stress, the amount of liability, I think 20% is a fair number for us to shoot for. And that's one of those conversations that I have with really price sensitive customers from time to time. Is I'll ask them, I'll say, hey, if somebody says, hey, you're too expensive. And I said, well, hey, let me ask you a question. If I told you on the front end that I was going to keep 20 cents on the dollar, would you be mad at me? Would you think I was trying to rip you off? And they're all like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm lucky if I do that. If I do everything perfect and we have a great month and everything is and I'm going to keep 20 cents on the dollar.
Wow. I do not have that level of transparency with my customers. So I also don't make 20 points though. So I probably could, because it's even less than 20 cents on the dollar.
Yeah. Let me make this clear. I'm not having that conversation on a daily basis. I might have had it twice with somebody that I knew well enough to have that conversation with.
Yeah.
That's not a good strategy for dealing with price shoppers.
If you knew that for every $1,000 of revenue, I was going to lose $3, because that's what I did last month. Would you think that I was trying to rip you off? So there are some dudes in pro service that are regularly 24, 25, 26%. And that's one of the most valuable things for me being a part of pro service, is being able to, just have a line to those guys and gals and be able to talk to them about, what they do, and, hey, I'm thinking about this. What are your thoughts? And that kind of thing. That kind of peer group is really valuable. So, what would you say? I think it's already people who are reaching out to a coaching company or to a 20 group company are already well above average to even be thinking about that. In many cases, but what do you think the average is across the industry for net profit?
Yeah. So the best, obviously there's no way to 100% know this, but we've had, Parmelis puts out some data each year. They do their state of the industry report. There are some other companies that happen to put out like state of the industry reports and some data. And kind of what it seems like is, looking through that stuff, is somewhere around 5%, tends to be the industry average. I would say there's 240,000 shops in America. The last time I looked at the census, my guesstimate, and this is a 100% guesstimate, I would say less than 10% of them are getting some type of formal coaching or in a peer group. And I would say that 50% or more are either unprofitable or break even.
Yeah.
They're cash flowing enough to keep the business open, but not really generating income.
Well, they're not even opening a monthly P&L and scrolling to the bottom to look at that number. What they're doing is they're managing by the checkbook, right?
Sure. Yep. And I think that I think everybody that's been in business at some point in time, unless you started off with an MBA or, an economics degree, that's how we started running our business was, emotionally off the checkbook. And as we look at the bank account, and as long as there was money in the bank account, we felt good about it. I can tell you that when you get to the point where you can start looking at these numbers and understanding what our industry, norms are and what those benchmarks should be, like we just went over for the GP, and then what should your cost of labor benchmark be? What should your cost of parts benchmark be? And we start running the business off of the P&L instead of off the shop management system and the bank account, then that net profit number always improves.
Yeah, for sure.
Always.
Unless you're like me and you screw the business up and cause it to go from its best month ever to a mediocre month, bad month.
So let's go back to the root cause of that now, because I say we were going to go over the P&L first. We were going to cover the numbers. I was going to slap your hand for not giving me updates on the performance report, so I don't have week-to-week data to really see here. But walk me through how we pulled somebody off the front counter after our best month ever and did not put somebody else in that spot during that time frame. Because I know you did it to cross-train.
Yeah, there's some evolution happening within the greater company, and there's been some promotions and leadership, and they've been kind of tasked with helping to implement my vision. We've had such huge success at the big store with implementing rack attack and speed of service and multi-stage sales conversations, that kind of thing, and it's not happening at all in the Raleigh stores. And pretty much of all of the changes that I've made, the only thing that's been implemented in the Raleigh stores is free diag, right? And it's been beneficial is the reason that car count is up the way that it is, because it just removes a lot of the barriers there. But for that system to work, you need the other aspects also. And so we're up 40%, 39% year to date, year over year at the big store where we've implemented all these things, and it's much more moderate to flat in the Raleigh stores comparatively. Hillsborough Street is up for sure, but not where it could be. So, they made the choice that we need to get the rack attack in place at Northwest Street, my other Raleigh location. And to do that, we need to shuffle some people around. And that shuffling really kind of took the wind out of the sails for Hillsborough Street. We moved one of the advisors out and left the other advisor there kind of trying to answer all the phones and greet all the customers and sign for all the parts and send all the returns and manage 3 technicians and their workload. And it didn't work.
So my question, looking back on it, if we had an opportunity to do that over again, because essentially you had about a $30,000 haircut, right? So that's a pretty expensive training session.
Yeah.
So my question to you is if we had the opportunity to cross-train and then rotate, if we Monday morning quarterbacked it, could we have rotated somebody over to fill that slot while he was cross-training at another location?
Yeah, hindsight being what it is, probably. But at the same time, when I think about where we were onboarding and training new hires at the big store also. And I'll be interested to see how June falls out. We're already over halfway through the month, so I kind of know how it's going, but we're picking up a fair amount of the slack that was created in May. And by the end of this month, I think we'll be back to full bore, full steam. So it was probably a 45-day brain fart.
So, and again, you have multiple locations, so this problem is going to happen again. And I'm sure your implementation is going in phases. So you did a cross train for phase 1 of the implementation. Do you foresee there being a need for cross training at a future time?
Well, the way that yes is the short answer.
Okay. So my recommendation would be you get with Xander, get with
Steven.
and you guys come up with a plan of how to rotate. And it may not be able to happen every time, but if I can't make it work in a vacuum, then I can't make it work in real life at all, right? So I would come up with a way that in a perfect world, we would have been able to done a 1-for-1 swap out and still had coverage at the Hillsborough location while we were cross training the other gentleman at the other store, because it's going to happen again. I just don't want to see you lose a whole month of profit revenue from training.
Well, and I just want to set the guys up for success too. I want them not to be hung out to dry.
Well, and if we take a look at that,
you're saying I should, right?
Well, and it's a stressful environment, that we put the rest of the team in. Your advisor that was left alone there at the front counter, you have production pay, even though they have a strong guarantee that all those guys do have a production pay as well. I'm sure that their production pay was down for that month. So we essentially, everybody kind of absorbed in some of that as well. So from a planning standpoint, I'd like to see us get an SOP together that at least gives us the opportunity to not make that a round two. I'd like that to be a one and done problem for you.
Yeah. Not stumble into the same landmine multiple times, I guess.
Yep.
Cool. I think we can do that. And I know that Xander and Steven both listen to this. And so, we'll be releasing this episode next Tuesday. And so, I'm sure there will be conversations that come from that, but we also are having conversations daily,
Sure. So let's talk about how we can, I think May's a great learning experience. Like I said, I think we got, I think we got a good idea. Glad to hear that, as we sit right here in June, that looks like that investment of time is at least paying dividends and things are starting to rebound and get back to where they should be. On the future side of things, can you walk me through, I know the last time we talked about the effective labor rate and some of the pricing strategies that you have in place that affect that effective labor rate. We talked about maybe doing the audit of how many, we called them push cars at that point in time.
Yep.
So how many diag only tickets do we have, just so we can put some proof in the pudding. And
absolutely.
So I know
if I go to in TechMetric, I'm trying to remember what report it was that I found that information. I'm looking for sales details, where I had, the tickets where it's going to be, as you call it, a push car is going to be 1 hour of labor and no retail dollars.
Yep.
Right? So where they got a free hour of diag and they bought nothing. So I know that. Where did I find that report?
Yes, I take my sales category report, upload it in Excel, push it into GPT, and tell it to give me how many $0 tickets I have.
Well, yeah, that's probably way faster. If I go into, let me look at the month of May and make sure I'm logged into the right store and the right date range, and had 75 diag jobs in May, and I was at that store, and let me sort by total ticket value, or I can sort by gross profit dollars too, because it'll be negative. 1, 2, 3. It's more than 10 because that's how many it defaults to per page. While it's loading, I'm going to make my guess that it was 20 of the 75 were walks.
Okay. I'm taking the over.
You think more than a third of my free diags walked and didn't buy anything?
Yes.
There's no way that's the case.
Or they just bought another hour of diag.
Where do I see the total ticket? Man, I should have had this shit ready for you. I'm sorry. Labor total. No, because this is just diag lines. It's not the whole ticket. I know there's a way to do this because I did it for you after our last call, and then I didn't send you the results. It's not pretty. It was over 25%.
So my question there is, and I lost you. You still there, Mike?
I am. I'm here.
There you go. Sorry. I opened up another window there and it covered you up.
I got it. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 of 75.
How many have less than 200?
Oh man, you gonna make me do that shit too? Okay, hang on. Add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Add 12 to that, so that's 27.
Okay, and we had 75, so that's 36%. And the reason I said less than 200 because you can't have a repair that's going to be less than $200.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah,
it's not possible. So the reason that I'm bringing that number up is that's 36% of those are diag only tickets that are not generating a repair. I don't know what the value of that is yet, but what I would say is I would want to look into that 64% and see what the revenue is off the 64%, after we total that up. My question and just food for thought is do you think that there is a less costly avenue to generate the same goal that you're trying to generate there? Because you're looking at that as a customer acquisition tool as part of your marketing. I don't care one bit that you give it away for free. Nothing wrong with it because it's built into your pricing strategy. Understand exactly what you're doing. My question is the return off of that investment right now what you anticipate, what you want it to be? Are you able to sell brakes off of it? Are you able to sell rear shocks off of it? Are we diagnosing lifters and quoting out a $13,000 engine and then watching it load up on a rollback and drive down the road?
Yeah, well, so there's absolutely some of both of those things, right? And any response at this point is anecdotal, right? We've got to really dig into the numbers to give you the truth. And one of the things I want to do is I want to do that exercise for May and for April.
Yep.
Because,
and that's a great point because the sales process could have been diluted
yeah,
in May as well, and you could have had better results in April. So I think that's a very fair point. Go back and take a look at when you had your full process available and you're able to work your customer experience process at 100%. I would be interested to see what that number was in your up month, just to compare.
And I can do it also at the Garner store so that we can compare it to a store where we have the rack attack in place and the sales process in place. Yep. Versus just the free diag and kind of sell them everything at once process and not really the speed of service, and kind of see bad month as it is, good month as it is, good month where we're trying to go, and where we're trying to execute. So
I think that would be a really good exercise for you to do and kind of bring you full circle as to whether that strategy is I'm not saying that it's hurting you necessarily, that it's killing you. It may not be the most efficient strategy. And I'm not saying that it's not, I just don't know. But
well, and devil's advocate, obviously I'm invested in this
sure.
Methodology, and I'm emotionally invested in defending it, right? Because that's what I do. But if I don't have the front of house staff to execute on the plan and the concept the way that I should, then this is a waste. It's just like doing cheap oil changes are a waste if you don't know how to convert the customers into buying customers.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to use this process, I have to have the team support and tools in place so that they can execute on it, because otherwise it's wasted marketing dollars.
I agree with you there. So, but I want to go ahead and throw something out there because you're missing the boat here. You should have just sent a link.
I could have just sent a link. Oh man, that was an absolutely amazing rant. And to be there in person, like the video didn't really catch it, but like his whole head turned red and he had like this vein popping out
Captured
on
it
his
pretty good.
forehead. Oh my
Yeah.
God. It looked like he had a brake line under his skin. That vein was so big. And there was spittle flying across the desk at me. Pollock thought he was going to have to like step between us to protect me from the rage of David.
Yeah. You should have just had your other advisor send out twice the number of links, and you would have made up for all that lost business that you had with the
it's such an ignorant statement to believe that you can replace human relations with a fucking link. It tells me that we just have different goals for our business. There you go. How's that?
So it was entertainment. I got a lot of entertainment value, but I do believe, and I brought it up out of jest, but also kind of as a real life example counterpoint here as to, because I'm very confident that you guys send estimates via TechMetric.
Well, we used to always send the estimate and get them to approve it. We would sell it over the phone and send the link for them to click approval. We send the DVI and sell it over the phone, but I don't send the approval link anymore. I mean, you don't have to in North Carolina.
So I do not either, but I would almost bet if you go back and take a look at May and you look at your advisor running the counter by himself, I bet if you go look through the text messages, you're going to find a lot more of that happened.
I think that he was just sending the text message and moving on to the next one.
And not saying anything wrong with it. I'm saying that just by virtue of trying to get stuff done and handle the volume himself. So not that he's doing anything,
there's no malicious intent. It's
no malicious intent. He's trying to deal with that same amount of car count that you had when he had a countermate helping him. And in that, we're going to revert back to what's easiest to be able to get through that in the process. And he's going to pick and choose which ones he sells in person and which ones he sells via text message. But I would be very interested to see how many of those you did and what the conversion rate was off a text message.
I guarantee it ain't the same.
It's not the same.
There's no way. So John, the service advisor who's been at Hillsborough historically, is at Northwest Street right now, cross training on Rack Attack and everything. And where everybody will end up is still kind of up in the air, but he's back in an environment where he has support and it's a manageable volume, and he is crushing it.
Yep.
And it's just like, we really muzzled him. Like we limited his potential because the guy that was working with him is also dynamic in his skill set. And so, I need to equip him with, the team's got to be set up for success. And that was what caused, I believe, the struggles in May was there wasn't enough support for the volume that was there.
So with that, I think what we identified there is it's 50% system, 50% people, right? If you go to what the production of this store was before you implemented your system in place, it was okay, but not as good as what it was in April, where you saw the system take in. And then you had a good team as well. So then you took part of the team away, and now you still had the same system, but we didn't have enough team support to be able to work the system. And the system fell apart, and you get what you get out of it. So, but that's, like I said, I think just for you to have some data to support that argument that you guys had on that last podcast, I'd go back through and just count how many links were sent in May and see, maybe track down what the approval rating was off of those. Because like I said, I would almost guarantee you it's different.
Well, I think if you look at the size of the average quote that you're sending, and if you're having a conversation versus just sending a link, and then compare that to closing rate, I don't know that it's easy to pull that data. But I don't know much about David's business. I do know that he doesn't really have a service advisor. They just send the link.
Right.
And
I do know, I mean, there's people that we know, Mike, that follow that exact same process, and they're they're profitable and they're comfortable with what they're doing. I can tell
what
you
your goals are.
Yeah, it depends on what your goals are. It depends on what your market is to a certain extent. But I think a lot of it also, depends on what your customer experience standard is, and like you said again, what you're trying to achieve. But I think it's undeniable that a quality skilled service advisor is a huge improvement in any business
Over a link.
any business. And from a customer experience standpoint, from a dollars and cents standpoint, from an internal team experience standpoint, if you sit down and talk to any really good technician and ask them what the worst part of the industry is, most of them will tell you bad service advisors or bad managers.
Bad managers
And
first, bad service advisors second. Yeah.
But I mean, it's almost neck and neck. And just because if you think about how demoralizing it is as a good technician, you spend all this time doing a DVI and recommending all this stuff, and you make these nice long tech stories and put your 12 tech finds on there, and a bad service advisor looks at it and estimates 25% of what they saw on there, and then finagles the tech time in there because they're too scared to estimate it at full price and sends it out. And then the technician's the one that eats that poo sandwich at the end of it.
Yeah. So something that's interesting is we were having a conversation the other day about implementation of the rack attack, and some technicians have an issue because the shops that don't yet have rack attack pay 2/10 for a DVI, but a good DVI takes probably 45 minutes with pictures and write up and videos and everything else. And they're like, well, I'm going to lose those 2/10. I don't get it, because every time you do a DVI, you're losing time, because there's no way you can do a DVI in 12 minutes to the standard that we expect. And so I'm taking away the thing that the time is the worst on, and I'm giving it to someone who that's all they do, and they're paid hourly, right? So they're not negatively impacted by it, and they're trained on just do it consistently. Are they perfect? No, they make mistakes, they miss things, or they're incorrect on things. But so do the technicians. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes.
Sure.
And I don't understand why there's a hesitancy to give away the thing that you lose the most time on every day in favor of more of the things that you have a labor bump on. Because
we had this conversation a couple calls back, actually, and there is, as much as technicians hate flat rate, and I think by and large the majority of technicians in the industry have a negative connotation about flat rate.
Yeah.
Or at least the loud small minority do, at least.
I think it's probably a majority at this point.
It's very well documented that flat rate's not an ideal pay scale for most technicians, and I'm fine with that. But I would say that my request of technicians out there is, if that's going to be your feeling, you have to let go of the flat rate mentality of observing work to pay, because essentially you have a hybrid pay system, right? Because you have a guarantee, and then you allow them to earn past that guarantee if they produce. All right. So we can call it what it is, but that's not flat rate. It's a hybrid pay. They're getting paid whether they're sitting on a 5-gallon bucket watching cars drive by and there's nothing going on in the shop, as we've observed on your P&L from May.
Yeah.
Now they're not earning that full potential, obviously, but they're still getting a good guarantee pay. So if I look at it that way, and I broke it and I had this because we have a hybrid pay system in our shop as well. So when I talk to technicians that are on a hybrid pay system, my question is, let's break it down to how much you got paid for the job and not how much time you got paid on the ticket. So what did you actually make? Like, it took you an hour to do it, and I paid you the hour on the clock, and then you got an X amount of production bonus on top of that. Whether it's the book time or not is immaterial, right? So if your on the clock amount was $30 an hour and you got a $5 production bonus for that, even though if you were on flat rate, it would have been more, but you made $35 an hour to do that particular job. My question is that fair? They were like, well, yeah, that's fair. I'm like, well, then what are we sitting here
But I
arguing?
could have made 75 if I was on flat rate. Yeah, but if you're on
But
flat
you're not,
rate and there were
but
no
you're not a
cars, you
70,
wouldn't
yeah,
make
but
anything.
flat rate wouldn't be a $75 an hour flat rate.
Yeah.
You would have been a $35 an hour flat rate guy and you would have made $35 an hour. Right. So that's where, it's a point of view. It's a perception. It's the only way that they know to judge their worth is through the production time. And,
Well, and
and
there's
it's been
also,
manipulated against them for so long too, the other way, to
they
their
just assume they're
point,
being screwed.
that they assume that they're being screwed
Yeah.
over. And so they have a valid reason for that fear because they've been on a flat rate pay before at some point in time. And there was an advisor or a manager that was paid on a GP dollar or GP percentage based deal. And they said, oh, that 4-hour job, that technician's going to do it in 2. They kept the dollar amount the same to the customer and they whittled the time down to 2 to the technician. I've watched it happen in shops before. And so I understand why they feel that way. I think that the conversation that we had is taking a look at doing the labor bump on the multiplier and then bringing them in and having that conversation with them about, listen, you're going to see lower times on these commodity service tickets because I can't pay a bonus for that service. Because essentially at that point in time, once we have a hybrid pay scale, the production time is only there to calculate the bonus. It's not there to calculate pay. And I can't bonus on those jobs because
and that's what we've done in Garner is, we had a 25-point labor bump on anything that wasn't a canned job that you had to look up labor time on, and that was there because technicians were heavily involved in doing really thorough DVIs and helping with estimates, and all the reasons that you put a labor bump in, and we took away the DVIs and the estimating and the labor time lookups and all that kind of stuff. But we allowed them to maintain the labor bump that we had given them to make up for those things. But then we drew down the labor time on those commodity items that were always crushing our effective labor rate, right? And the net effect has been good. So
sure,
if it had been really bad, or if it had been bad at all, someone would have come to me and said, "Hey, I'm making less money because of this."
Yeah, and I think you did the right. I mean, you have to sit down with them. That's what we did when we implemented that philosophy. Was we just brought everybody in and said, "Hey, you're going to see some reduced times here. If at any point in time you feel like this is impacting your pay, here's what your average hours are right now individually. We're going to be monitoring this. If you feel like it's a problem, and then that gain is as long as we're selling more, as long as we're selling like we're supposed to sell." Then it's a net gain to the technician because we're able to get a larger amount of higher effective labor rate repair work in the door. And that's where they're not making money off DVIs anyways.
Yeah.
It's the least efficient thing that they do in the shop is a DVI.
Absolutely. We're pushing up on an hour here. And before we go, there is something that I would like to request that you share if you could.
Sure.
Part of my shtick is it's confessions of a shop owner. I want to hear what went wrong at the shop. And we don't typically do that on these coaching calls because we're kind of focused on the numbers and everything. But you had some shenanigans at your shop that were too good not to share. If you'd be so kind as to just kind of let the world know, that would be wonderful, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this about Elite. All of our coaches at Elite are either current shop owners or very recently very successful shop owners that have exited out. So I try to make sure that I tell all of my clients, because I'm still an active shop owner as well, we have all the same. Just because I'm a coach doesn't make anything perfect about my organization either. But we did have a little bit of excitement last week that was outside of the norm. And so I was getting ready to pack up and go on vacation last week for a little mini 3-day getaway. And I got a text message from my store manager. And the text message said, "Hey boss, how's your day going?" Which is never, that's never the way that you want the conversation to start if you're talking to an employee or a child, a child that you have or anything like that. It's not where you want to go. So I'm like, I look, hey, I don't have a whole lot of time. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is it? And so she texts back and she's like, so that her first response was, well, everybody's okay, which is, but it's probably a 9. And I was like, ah. So I make an emergency run. I'm fortunate I'm 7 miles away from the store. So I hop in my car, drive down to the store, and I get there, and everybody's kind of hovered around, and I see a minivan nosed into a toolbox, and I get to my office, and the office wall is impregnated. It's got a big
with the other side of the toolbox.
Yeah, with the other side of the toolbox. So to tell the story of what happened, we have a QC process that every single time a vehicle is completed, we vacuum out the driver's side floorboard, we spray some smell goods, we wipe down the area and make sure there's no fingerprints, all that good stuff, document out mileage, check tire pressures, normal QC process, right? And so we have a support staff there. And one of 3 of the support staff members will perform that operation. And this time it was our porter, who does a fantastic job. But he got overly ambitious this particular day, and he had been performing a QC behind the vehicle in question and had that vehicle locked in. The technician had just finished a brake job all the way around. So he did pads and rotors front and rear, and couldn't pull the vehicle out to go do the test drive on it and burnish the rotors and reset the brake pedal. And so he went and grabbed another ticket. He was gone. While he was gone, the porter decided he was going to move that vehicle out of the way, saw that the vehicle that was in front was done, and was going to jump on getting the QC on that one done. And Mike, you've been to my shop, but I have 3 bays on the back side of the shop. And on the back side, there's a bit of a hill that they have to go up to get to the access road. And so he backed up, and it's a pretty steep hill. Well, when he was backing up, he realized that he couldn't stop. So so instead of backing up 5 feet to be able to get the door open to vacuum it out to clear the lift, he kept going, and he went up the hill and panicked and put it in neutral and rode it back down the hill.
Right back into the shop.
Back into the shop, and demoed 2 toolboxes and the wall to the office and the front bumper of the customer vehicle. So
did the airbag deploy? Was it that hard to hit?
The airbag did not deploy. So we were, as far as damage goes, I mean, we were fortunate. Like I said, main thing was, like she said, everybody was safe. Nobody happened to be in the office when it happened. We missed that by about 2 minutes, and about 6 inches of penetration more, and it would have got into some of the office equipment. So it really just damaged the wall itself. And so, but yeah, so I mean, I think Elon Musk has the quote that, entrepreneurship is like staring into the abyss while eating glass, and at some point in time you get used to staring into the abyss, but you never stop chewing the glass. And so
it's always something, man.
There's always something. And if anybody thinks that they got into this and this was going to be at some level, I'm going to get to 1 million and this is going to be a gravy train and it's going to be easy. Or once they get to 1 million, they're like, oh man, once I get to 2 million, it's just going to be a gravy train and it'll be easy. I try to tell all my clients, it's just like your kids, right? There's different stages of the business. And every time you move through one stage to another, you leave one set of problems behind and you take on a whole new section of problems. And, that's, when you get bigger and you add more staff and you add more processes and you do more stuff, you wind up with a few more little mistakes like that happen throughout the course of time. But, that was my confession. That's what went wrong last week for me. So,
well, keep that juju up in Roxborough. I don't want it down here in Raleigh. So.
He is a good porter. And again, I think we talked about this, but we started pushing the pace on him on, trying to get these QCs done faster and get some things turned around. And I think, like I said, he got a little ambitious there and got ahead of it, but it allowed us to go back and rework our process of, hey, what should we do? I think just a really quick point, because we had this conversation internally. I think we forget how dangerous what we do really is, and the fact that every car that comes to us is broken in some way, shape, or form, and we take for granted just getting in and moving a car from point A to point B could be dangerous. So there are some things that, from a technician standpoint, we probably know what to do, but how many times does your advisor get in a car and move it and doesn't really know what's wrong with the car just because where it was parked at was the wrong spot? So we were able to create some quick little checklist. Hey, when you get in the car, you need to, check the brake pedal, do this, do that. So it's not how you want to have the refresher, but it was a good reminder.
Yeah.
To all of us.
The expensive learning lesson.
A very expensive one.
All right, man. Well, thanks for the conversation. Thanks for the little bit of corrective action, accountability, and I'm going to get the performance report updated as soon as we stop recording. I'm going to dig into that, some of that analysis that you had asked about, and probably also going to review this episode with Steven and Xander because we were reviewing P&Ls yesterday. So this is a good exercise for them as well. So I appreciate you, man.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike.
Talk to you soon.